Hey everyone, I am doing some builds for D&D 5e 2024. Kind of got just randomly inspired to do this. I was watching some other videos online from a couple of folks and reading some posts about certain characters and subclasses in D&D, and I figured, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and see if I can't come up with some interesting character builds to talk about, and maybe just put a video out there and see how people like them. So, uh, yeah, today I'm going to do a character build for a Winter Walker Ranger. Um, this one kind of stuck out to me of the group from Heroes of Faerun. Actually, two that really stuck out to me were the Banneret and the Winter Walker. I both really like the idea of these characters. A lot of people are kind of dissing Banneret right now. Maybe in a follow-up video, I'll talk about how I've built a Banneret fighter, and I think that's been pretty fun in some of the games that I've played recently. But for today, we're going to focus on the Winter Walker Ranger here, right? So very much this, as the level 3 feature would suggest, a frigid explorer, someone who's out there in the cold north of Icewind Dale or the ice reach of Dragonlance, right? Or any number of cold environments here, right? And they come with a lot of interesting features that I think add to the Ranger class, right? I like what they did with the Hunter's Rhyme feature, where at least you get a little something out of casting Hunter's Mark as well. In this case, you get temporary hit points. And like the Fey Wanderer, you also have an expanded spell list that comes with a lot of, obviously, ice and cold spells, as well as some control and a little bit of deep removing curses, debuffs, and the like. So let's get into the build. I think the way I'm just going to do this is I'm just going to go into D&D Beyond and pull up the character builder here, character sheet, and just talk about how I kind of thought about it and came up with the character. This here is Roland Arendelle, just a name that I thought of, and he is a wood elf. Don't really have much of a background for him right now. This is kind of just like a blank slate character. I assume this is, in Faerun, so we're somewhere in Icewind Dale, right? And what I wanted to do a wood elf, I wanted to go very classic fantasy with this, so I chose a wood elf because they have all the right features that you would want on a ranger type character, right? Where they get the extra 5 feet of speed, they get spells that really lean into that ranger vibe, if you will. They get Druidcraft as a cantrip, right? So that's the kind of character I wanted to play, right? This very much, magical, outdoorsy type of character, right? So let's actually go into the D&D builder. I'm just going to take this step by step and talk through, my choices here, right? As far as the core ranger traits, I always typically will choose stealth and survival on most of my rangers. I just feel like this is sort of the niche that these characters tend to fulfill. And then as far as the other choices here, a lot of people take perception. Obviously, I'm actually going to get that from elf, so I'm not too worried about grabbing it here for my core ranger stuff. So I wanted to lean into what I think this character would be focused on up in the cold north there, which is actually going to be animal handling. Right, so those are going to be my 3 core traits that I'm going to have going forward, and then obviously I'll be able to get some expertise in stealth and survival in the later levels here. As far as spell casting goes, we'll talk about spells in a little bit here, but I tend to prefer the spells that are unique to the ranger, right, or that offer something utility based, right? Because I'm a half caster, I'm not too worried about using spells to like a large degree in combat, because for the most part, as a ranger, I prefer just focusing on Hunter's Mark and doing damage and being consistent with using that spell, right? And especially because with Favorite Enemy, you get the extra uses of it. So I prefer having a bit more out of combat or spells that have more of a unique effect, right? Favorite Enemy and Weapon Masteries. These are the 2 Weapon Masteries I pretty much always choose on Ranger. Longbow, pretty obvious there as to why. It's like the core crux of the class. If you're a crossbow person, then yeah, fine, choose that one as well. But for me, longbow is always my main ranger choice. And then scimitar, right? I find with the ranger that making more weapon attacks is generally better than like Vex, for example, where you get advantage on the attack, right? I typically will take Vex on my rogues, right? Vex is important for being able to land those sneak attack hits and getting those there. But for Rangers, just getting in as many attacks as you can, triggering Hunter's Mark as often as you can, always very important here. And I'll get a little bit ahead of myself here, but for this character, we're actually going to start off doing archery, and then we'll eventually be moving into 2-weapon fighting. So I'm pretty much going to be having these weapon masteries the entire time throughout the levels, and very rarely would I change these up here. So talk about that. As for the spells at level 1, I just picked, two spells here. Cure Wounds I always like having as like a backup heal. I imagine this character being out in the bush and he gets injured somehow, being able to quickly and magically heal himself would be pretty important. And then Hail of Thorns, we're really only keeping the spell for like the first 2 levels. This spell will eventually unprepare, and then probably not going to use it again because on a Winter Walker, you are going to get Ice Knife. So that will effectively be your replacement for Hail of Thorns once you hit level 3. So for the first 2 levels, it just kind of gives us a little bit of extra area of effect damage. So if there's a group of enemies crowded around each other, we shoot our longbow, we use Hail of Thorns as a bonus action, and we deal that damage. So those are the spells for the first 2. As for the background, I'm picking Guide. Guide is important for me here because it gets me the actual origin feat I want, as well as the ability score improvements that I would want for this character as well, right? As far as the skill proficiencies are concerned, I just, go with, the ones that you get from Guide or Athletics and Nature, right? This just feels very on brand for what I expect a Guide to be good at, being able to traverse the wild and knowing about the area around him, right? Cartographer's tools make sense, handy, and being able to draw maps and remembering how to get around places. And Magic Initiate is obviously the choice that we are getting here from going with Guide, and you get the Druid version of Magic Initiate when you go with the Guide. So in this case, obviously we're taking Wisdom here for our Ranger, and these are the spells that I'm going with here. Let me talk about them. Guidance is obviously a given here. 1d4 to d20 tests that are ability checks, very handy, pretty much on anybody. We always want something like this. Mending, I like the idea of mending because, like, if I'm this ranger out in the brush and like my rope snaps, or there's like a tear in my tent, or just kind of like the RP of what could go wrong. Like in real life, like mending would have so many great applications for your overall survival and bushcraft and all that, right? So just being able to have a spell like this would be handy in a pinch, right? And then Goodberry is my level 1 spell for this choice. I personally think that Goodberry is objectively probably the best level 1 spell you can take from Magic Initiate Druid. And the reason why I feel like that is because with Goodberry, it's a level 1 spell. You can't upcast it, but you never need to upcast it. And realistically, you only need to ever use the spell once a day. And being able to do so without a spell slot is even better, right? So at the low levels, you'll always be able to have a little bit of extra healing in a pinch from having Goodberry, and you get all that, that 10 HP for free. And then the other important thing, though, and, there's been some contention around the spell when it comes to, like, people who are really into, like, the hard survival campaigns, right? But Goodberry would effectively allow you to ignore the nourishment mechanics because it sustains you for a day, right? So being able to have free castings of this will keep you going out there in the wild. Then the only thing you really have to worry about is, like, how much water you're taking in that day. And if you get, like, proficiency with brewer supplies, then you can get some potable water, and then you have your food and your water covered, and then you have to worry about just shelter and all the basic stuff there. So that's Magic Initiate there. For the ability scored choices, pretty obvious, but obviously we're going to be going with +1 to Wisdom, and then the +2 to Dex for now. Eventually, though, we're really going to prioritize Wisdom over Dexterity, and I'll get into why that's the case later on. We're actually going to end up with more Wisdom, a higher Wisdom score than we will a Dexterity score when we get to that point in time. As for my species, like I said, I went with a Wood Elf. A couple of reasons why. extra 5 feet of speed. Get my Elven lineage here, which gets you Long Strider. Being able to cast Long Strider and Pass Without Trace for free once a day is excellent, right? It also gives you the Druidcraft cantrip, which I pretty much call the Bushcraft spell, right? So the way I think about it, like RP-wise, like, you can use Druidcraft to kind of get a sense of what the weather's going to be like for that day, or, as for the good berry spell, right? Like, you can grow that plant which the good berries are growing off of, right? And that's how you actually get the berries, if you will, right? So you have like a real legitimate reason as to why you can just magically conjure these berries, right? Because you sprout this plant and then you harvest the berries from it, right? So big fan of Wood Elf for Ranger here. A couple other things that are very handy for this is the Keen Senses, so getting that extra proficiency with a skill. Obviously, in this case, we're taking Perception. That's just numero uno here. And Trance. This is actually going to be important for this build specifically once we hit level 4, and I'll explain at level 4 why Trance will be helpful. And then as for languages, I typically always go with Elvish and Dwarvish. I just try to go with the most common languages at these early levels. And then, later on in Ranger, we'll actually get some other more unique languages that we'll be able to learn as well, right? As for our ability scores, when I do builds like this, I typically try to stick to standard array as close as possible. Main reason why I do that is so that, one, I just don't like the whole optimized, 15, 15, 15, blah, 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 8, 8, 8 for the rest. I think that's like super lame when people just keep the best and drop the rest. I don't really like that. I like having like a nice distribution of my skills, so I feel like a real character versus just someone who's, playing just the mechanics of the game, right? So that's why I try to stay very close to the standard array, and also because regardless of if you're rolling stats or if you are point buying, the likelihood that you'll be able to get the point distribution to match the build is higher, right? So in this case, this is what we're going with. We're getting the 16 to start in the dexterity from the +2. We're getting the 15 in wisdom, 14 in con, and that's pretty much going to stay that way. 12 in strength. I'm prioritizing strength because Rangers get proficiency in saving throws for strength, so having this be at least higher will just get you that much better at those saving throws. And then intelligence and charisma, this is really up to you. I prefer on my Rangers being more intelligent than I prefer charismatic, but that's also specific to this sort of more outdoorsy wild man type of build. Like if you're playing like a Fey Wander or someone who is more of like a face type of ranger, then yeah, charisma you can obviously go with. It makes most sense for that character, right? As for your starting equipment, so you're just going to take pretty much the ranger starting equipment here, and for your guide starting equipment, you're actually going to pretty much forego all this stuff. You'll pick all this stuff up later on. You'll want the 50 GP right away, and I'm going to tell you what you're going to do with that 50 GP right when you build your character here, right? So, pick A, take B for guide, and your character is done. So let's come back here. Here we are at Roll-in Arendelle again. And like I had mentioned before, so this character would have some gold in their pocket here. So right at level 1 while we can, we're actually going to spend that 50 gold, and we're going to pick up this item here, which is the Winter Camouflage, right? You look in the Heroes of Faerun book. This is I believe 50 gold for this item. Where is Adventure Equipment? Winter Camouflage. Yep, 50 gold for the Winter Camouflage there. So you're going to get that right away, and what that'll allow you to do is when you are in the appropriate environment, essentially your favorite terrain, which is going to be like those cold tundra, taiga, Arctic regions, you're going to have advantage on your stealth checks. So quite a handy item to have right at first level there, for sure. And this will, very easy pickup there. So I was quite happy to be able to just grab that for this character specifically, right? All right, so this is our level 1 character. So like I said, we took our skills, we have our weapon masteries, we have, just some basic stuff here. And what I'm going to do is kind of talk through some of the progression of the character up to like level 7, and then we'll just talk about the character pretty much at max level, right, which will be level 20. This is going to be a straight ranger build, just spoiler alert. So we're doing 1 to 20 ranger, right? No multi-classing. I'll explain why for this build, and let's get on over to the level 7 version. All right, so here's the level 7 version of the character now. So you can see here from the stat distribution, at this point we've only had a single ability score improvement, and we've actually taken the +1 to wisdom. And you might be wondering what it is that we bumped up, or what we took to bump that up. And I will tell you, we actually took Chef, interestingly enough, right? A lot of people meme on Chef and consider it a fairly bad feat. In this particular case, I actually think Chef is quite good for this character, and the main reason why I'm saying Chef is actually good for this character is twofold here. One is that actually the replenishing meal for the short rest, it effectively helps round out the curve on hit dice for all the characters in your party. So if the more short rests you take, the more valuable this ends up becoming here. So being able to add an extra D8 just really helps round out the dice rolls that come from rolling hit dice there. So I find that to be quite a sleeper help when it comes to adventuring. And also just the whole idea of this character, is proficient with cook skills and utensils and could really make themselves like a decent meal out in the wild, right? The other thing that's interesting here is the bolstering treats, right? So rangers specifically have a lot of ways that they can generate temporary hit points for themselves, right? For the Winter Walker specifically, we have Hunter's Rhyme, right? That's going to give us a pool of temporary hit points. We're also going to have, I think it's called Tireless at like level 10. That will also be able to give us more temporary hit points as well. So in addition to that, we also have the Chef feat, which will actually give us these treats. Oh, wrong version of the character. Here we go. And what's good about this is that elves also make very good chefs too, right? So what that means is when we're taking a long rest, we only need to use 4 of the hours for the long rest, and then we can spend the other 4 hours while everyone else is resting to basically make a whole bunch of treats, right? And that'll just be extra temporary HP that we can just use regularly on bonus actions. And I think that's going to really help us pad out our hit points as we're adventuring throughout the day. So it's pretty handy here. As far as the spells go at this level, very much it's going to be pick your favorite. I don't really have too many recommendations here. I'm just going to quickly scroll through my spell list that I've chosen here, right? I'm just trying to see if there's any major standouts that I would definitely recommend. I mean, jump. It's good to pair with Long Strider, right? So I would definitely take that. Everything else is just kind of really pick your favorite here. Yeah, I like having Cure Wounds and Lesser Restoration. I also like taking Rituals on my Rangers as well. It gives them a lot of out-of-combat utility, right? So good to pick up those Ritual spells while you can. Yeah, so what we're going to do now is I think we're actually going to jump right to the level 20 version of the character and talk through some of the choices that I made with the class going into the higher levels now. So here we are at the level 20 version of the character. I'm going to come here to the builder, and I'm going to hover over class. Yep, and we're going to scroll through and just go through the choices. So like I said, so at level 4, we picked up Chef to get the +1 to our Wisdom and bring that up to a 16. The main reason why you want to focus on Wisdom for Rangers is a lot of your class features and even some of your subclass options will typically limit you based on the amount of... it basically limits you by Wisdom modifier times per day. So the more you could bump that Wisdom up, the more you'll be able to use a lot of those class features, like whether it's Tireless or Hunter's Veil, right? All those things you'll be able to do more frequently, right? Compared to don't get me wrong, dexterity is very useful, definitely, especially part of combat, dexterity C, initiative, right? Dexterity is a great ability score to have, but as far as keeping you going as a ranger, and that's what this character is really focused on, is getting the most mileage out of every single feature that we have, right? I think wisdom is going to kind of get you there a lot further along, right? So as far as the other things, you're going to get all the basic stuff that you get with ranger, right? You get roving for extra movement, fortifying soul, and at level 8, this was actually the toughest choice for me here. Is what do I do with my level 8 feature, my ability score improvement, right? Because by this level, we're really going to be focused on just trying to get our stats up as high as possible. So I really only have, this is like the last opportunity to maybe take an additional feat here. And I was pretty torn between this feat, Speedy, and Ritual Caster, actually, were the two that I was going back and forth on, right? Ritual Caster obviously gets you a lot of useful out-of-combat ritual spells, and it will allow you to do a quick ritual. So rather than having to do the full 10 minutes, you can just do it as like an action or whatever the casting time is for that spell, right? So a lot of good out-of-combat utility, but at the end of the day, I decided to go with Speedy for two reasons, right? One, we're actually not going to pick up a feat like Sharpshooter or one of those other features, because around level 12 is where we're actually going to switch from being an archer, and I should probably talk about this as well, right? So right now, in the earlier levels, like when I come back to level 7 here, right, just to show you, the fighting style that we have at level 7 is actually archery, right? So this will make up for the fact that we're not improving our dexterity at the lower levels because we have the +2 bonus to attack rolls, right? We really want to focus on the long bow and being the ranged fighter at these lower levels, right? Main reason for this, though, is for concentration on Hunter's Mark, right? You really don't want to lose concentration from taking hits, and your AC is probably one of the biggest flaws for Ranger if you're going like this 2-weapon fighting or the archery build, is that your AC is not very high, and unless you take feats like Defensive Duelist or you wear a shield, you don't have too many options outside of magic items to really bump that AC up and be more defensive, right? So you're really focused on trying to avoid hits or using your temporary hit points to pad it out, right? So for us, in the earlier levels, we're going to focus on archery, but then as we start getting into the higher levels, around like by level 12 into 13 is where we're going to start doing 2-weapon fighting, right? Because by level 13 is when we don't lose concentration on Hunter's Mark, right? So at that point in time, we're going to be able to, stay in melee combat and be able to do a lot of damage with Hunter's Mark and not lose concentration on the spells, so that we're doing that consistently, the damage there. So, and that's overall why I took Speedy, right? Because I really want to focus on, as a ranger, being this martial character who is highly mobile type of skirmisher, right? So as a wood elf, we already have higher speed, so now we're going to increase our speed by 10 feet. When we do need to dash, and unlike monk or rogue, we can't dash as a bonus action or disengage as a bonus action. So when we do need to move, being able to have opportunities have disadvantage against you is handy, and then also being able to avoid difficult terrain inherently without needing to use like freedom of movement, for example, right? Having to cast a spell is also handy there as well. Also, as far as like the Winter Walker is concerned, like by the higher levels of Winter Walker, you're going to have this like ability to kind of be the wind and the cold, if you will, right? So when you're trying to move in and out of combat, it makes sense that you're a lot harder to hit because you're like this more like ethereal, like you're one with winter type of character, right? So I think as far as like the RP is concerned, agile movement is very handy there. So between this and long strider and dashing, you're pretty much going to get like 130 feet of movement, and that's from roving you get that for climbing and swimming as well. Very handy there. I know a lot of people also like taking Fey Touched and whatnot and trying to get teleportation. For me, I'm focused on being speedy here, so that's my choice. As for expertise, stealth and survival, that's what I'm focused on this character, being a Winter Walker. Chilling Retribution is cool. Pretty much when you get it hit, you can take a reaction and force a creature to make a Wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. Another reason why you want Wisdom to be your highest stat. And then when they fail, the target has the stun condition, right? And you'll be able to do this a number of Wisdom modifier times, right? So by this level 20 here, we'll be able to do this 5 times, right? So being able to do this as often as possible when you get hit will also be a big boon for not only you, but your team as well. So at this point, from taking level 8 and taking Speedy, I would say that the character is effectively what I call mechanically viable. And what I mean by that is the build has gotten to a point where I don't need any other features of the build to really make it work the way I want it to. And at this point, I can just focus on just improving my ability scores, right? That's what I call being mechanically viable. So at this point in time, I don't need to take any other feats. I can just focus on bumping up my skills. So at level 12, I just take a regular ASI and pick up Dexterity and Wisdom. Gonna get these features. And Frozen Haunt here at level 15 is another reason why I'm going to go with 2-weapon fighting, right? Because when I do cast Hunter's Mark, I'm going to be able to do 2d4 cold damage in a 15-foot emanation, right? So I want to be close to enemies to deal that damage, and I want to be able to be speedy so I can get in and out of enemies and be able to, really surround them with the damage and try to get as many targets as I can with that Frozen Haunt here, that Frozen Soul, right? So that's pretty handy there. Level 16, other ability score, and like I said, this is really about just getting Wisdom up as high as possible. If you've been keeping track of the numbers, there's actually going to be a 19 Wisdom at level 16, so we're not quite at level 20 yet. We're actually going to use our epic boon to get us to level 20, because right now we have an 18 dex and we have 19 wisdom here at level 16. So level 19 is when we're going to have that 20 in wisdom here. Precise Hunter, advantage on all attacks that have Hunter's Mark against them. Feral Senses gets you blind sight. And now the epic boon. What could the epic boon be, I wonder? What would I pick for this character? A lot of valuable choices here, too. You can take the tried and true combat prowess. You can take dimensional travel. People love being able to teleport. Spell recall, if you want to kind of gamble on your spell slots and get those back. Even some of the new Heroes of Faerun epic boons, like Fortune's Favor, also very, very great, being able to reroll saving throws. But what I decided to do is I took the Boon of Bountiful Health. And this kind of goes along with the rationale behind taking the Chef feat at level 4 also, right? So let's talk about the Boon of Bountiful Health here. So gets us an ability score of our choice. Obviously, we're going to be bumping up our Wisdom to get that to 20, right? And the two things that are important here are temporary hit points. Anytime we gain them, we get 5 more, right? So between all the features that we've gotten from Ranger, from Hunter's Rhyme or Tireless, and even the treats that we're getting, at least 6 of them now, just from an hour's worth of work. Having all of those, being able to up them by 5, so that every treat you eat as a bonus action goes from being 6 to 11 temporary hit points. It's quite, in my opinion, a staggering increase to the amount of, let's call it, potential hit points that you're going to be able to save, right? By being able to soak a lot of that up to the temporary hit points, right? And then superior recuperation. This is really great because it's going to save you on your hit die, right? Because when you are taking those hits, you have a little bit of healing as a ranger because of your spell slots and even some of your class abilities. Like actually, the Fortifying Soul on Winter Walker actually gives you a heal. So this will give you and your allies that you choose 1d10 plus 20 at this level, right, for your healing. And it gives you advantage on the saving throws against Frightened as well. right? So you have a bit of healing, and when you do take those rests, right, we're just maxing out the hit points that we get from that D10 hit die, right? So, like I said, this build is all about just getting the most value and mileage out of everything that we're picking up at these levels here, right? And I feel like the boon of bountiful health at this stage of the game just makes sense for this type of character, because you're really going from just surviving out in the wilderness to actually thriving, right? And being able to just have like the best food and treats and the best to be able to recuperate the best, right? You're just the exemplar of what it means to be a survivalist out in the frozen tundra north or wherever you are, right? And then last but not least, Foe Slayer, right? A lot of people rag on this ability because it's kind of boring with the D10 versus a D6. But honestly, like between all the other things that we have going on with this character, I actually think that the D10 hit the D10 die for damage versus the D6 when we have 2-weapon fighting going on, and the D4 from Polar Strikes, and the Frozen Haunt. Like, we have a lot of extra damage that we're really adding on to here. So just being able to have this bump up to a D10 just makes it that much better, right? So this is the full 1 to 20 build. And I'm just going to come back here. I'll show you the spells that I took for this character at this level. Like I said, this is still very much a pick your favorite type of thing, but I really try to focus on actually quite a bit of level 2 spells. Level 3, I have a good number of level 3 spells. Level 4, I didn't pick up that many level 4 spells. I didn't find all the options I don't think to be as impactful, right? And even with the level 5 spells, like I didn't take like Steel Wind Strike or whatchamacallit, or Swift Quiver, because we do get Cone of Cold. I feel like that's going to be like our like AoE damage spell compared to Steel Wind Strike or Swift Quiver. So we have this inherently from Winter Walker, and I really just wanted to focus on other utility, right? So Tree Stride and Commune with Nature are really the 2 5th level spells that I've picked up here. Everything else is just upcasts at this point in time. Just a quick scroll through of this. Oh, just in case you were curious, Deft Explorer, the languages I chose were Giant and Sylvan. Just makes sense for the type of character being in this cold northern environment where we're talking to giants, or some sort of ancient fae that might belong to some type of grove or something, right? Just going to do a quick scroll through here and see if there's anything else I need to talk about for the build. I don't think so. Nope. Seems like that was everything. All right, well, if you made it this far into the video, just wanted to say thanks for listening to me ramble on about a character build. I hope this was at least useful for you as far as building a character that maybe is slightly different from like your typical archetypal sharpshooter or ranger or gloomstalker or whatever that people like to play quite commonly. And yeah, here is the 1 to 20 Winter Walker. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.